Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Double 18 Podcast live stream. I'm your host, Stephen Nagishi, and it's playoff football tonight. So, in the meantime, before the game starts or while the game is about to begin, my tonight's guest was kind enough to offer his time for about half an hour or so. It is a gentleman that I've been tracking down for quite a while. And I know I'm probably going to butcher your last name, but I'll try my best. It is associate editor with the Bears Wire, part of the USA Today network. It is Brendan Sugrue. Is it correct?
You're close. It's
Okay,
Sugrue.
yeah.
That's pretty good, though. That's pretty good because everybody forgets the H. I mean, man, and I'm sure you get it too. So I like, having a last name, it's, Nagishi, that's probably tough. I've gotten surgery. I've gotten Sergey. I've gotten sugar. Like, it's just, it's Butch City. So you got really close.
Can you repeat it one more time?
Sugrue.
Sugrue. Okay, Sugrue.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a she as in CHE, like, okay, the woman.
Yeah, or like Shah, like SHA or something. Sugrue. Yeah.
All
nice
right.
Irish name.
Brendan Sugrue from the Bears Wire joining us tonight to talk all things Chicago Bears as we enter Week 16 contest with the Detroit Lions this Sunday, and with two more games afterwards, the Thursday night game against the Seattle Seahawks, the last Amazon Prime game of the season, which comes the day after Christmas, and then the final game against the Green Bay Packers on the road as well. And Brandon, obviously, there was really not much fun things to talk about the Bears as we stare at the final three games of this regular season. So I'm not going to try and go back and look back at the pain of this 8-game losing streak since the last time they won in London, which obviously were kind of treated as a home game of sorts, but nonetheless, they have not been winning at all since the bye week. The Washington game in the Hail Mary was a complete disaster that kind of broke the camel's back, per se. When you look back at the whole season, between the start of the season and whenever the season ends, where do you rank this Hail Mary loss as one of the most painful loss that you have ever encountered or endured from the time you've been a Bears fan?
It's up there. It's definitely up there. It's probably, knowing what we know now, I would have to say it's probably number 2 behind the double doink. And I only say the double doink is number 1 because it was a playoff game, because you were assured that you are already playing for, a few games before a potential Super Bowl. I mean, the fact that it has broken this team as much as it has, as much as it did, I'm astounded by it, to be honest. And I don't know about you. I mean, we can rehash it all of that. The pain and just the shock that I felt, the air getting sucked out of my lungs, I've only ever felt that from the double doink before. And the thing that really upsets me the most, Steven, is that the double doink, the Bears fans, like the Bears players, coaches, the fans, everybody had to wait like 9 months for that to actually get resolved from the next season. This game, you had a week that you should have been able to just say, okay, let's put it behind us. Let's rally. Mistakes were made. If I'm Matt Eberflus, I am absolutely taking accountability in that moment and just doing the best I can to rally everybody, because I said it immediately after the game. I'm like, this is going to go one of two ways. This is going to galvanize the team, or this is going to break the team. And unfortunately, it broke the team, because obviously losing 8 games in a row now, I think it's 8 games. Like, there's just nothing. I don't think I've seen anything like that, where one singular play broke a team within a season like that. Even the blown losses the last couple of years under Matt Eberflus, they were still able to kind of rally and pick themselves up. This is a completely different story. So yeah, I would say it is actually the second worst loss of my experience, both as a fan and covering the team.
Yeah, as you know, I was actually at the Patriots game with my good friend Rashab Shakiri, the Bears YouTuber with his own channel, The Windy City Productions, and we actually tried to reach out to you, and we were trying to get together. If you remember,
I do.
we ended up, we didn't happen, but nonetheless, we tried our best, and we lucked into meeting Robert Schmitz, who recently announced his retirement, as you know, from his popular video, All 22 Reviews, and also running the Bears blog, which is owned and operated by Jeff Hughes for about maybe a year or two. But we ran into him despite the loss, and I remember, that Patriots game being one of the worst games I've ever attended in any sporting event. And I don't get to go too many because of the scheduling conflict as well as the cost and everything. I don't live in Chicago area, unfortunately, but the Patriots game, I thought, okay, this is a game that they can at least win and then get back on track. And then what I witnessed was one of the worst games I've ever attended. It was just eerie quiet. The wind was just howling, as you remember that day, for whatever reasons. The rain came down too, and that was also the last game of Shane Waldron's career. And then from there, it was just basically nothing went right. That Tyreek Stevenson's actions were just completely unacceptable, and then just basically, he was one of the biggest problems within the organization in terms of lack of accountability and discipline perspective. So, with Thomas Brown taking over, I thought that maybe the Bears would have a fighting chance, and I was so impressed with Brown's demeanor and way he carries himself. But unfortunately, the players are already given up, and next 3 games, basically, it doesn't look like the Bears would be able to pull out any wins at this point. So now we're going to have to probably look forward to the off season right now with so many storylines being involved now. The head coaching candidacy, we're hearing so much about, the Mike Vrabel versus Ben Johnson, and then the host of others. For those who don't follow you close enough on Twitter, X or Twitter or B-Sky right now, where is your, feeling about this job in terms of desirability and the men among leaders stuff? Is it completely overblown in your opinion?
It's not completely overblown, but I think we get into a habit of sort of separating the two between, okay, you need a person who can be that CEO type manager and be that, I hate the phrase, but leader of men, somebody who commands the room. And then you have the offensive coordinator, the offensive guru, again, words I do not like using, but I think a lot of people would kind of put those things in two different camps there.
Right.
Especially kind of realizing like, well, CEO type leader of men could be a defensive coach because they're always hard nosed and they're always just, demanding excellence and everything. Excellence is demanded by every single person that comes in that room when it comes to a head coach. It's just how they go about it. And I really think like winning cures all. It really does. And if you have a good system in place, if you have, an efficient offense, a defense that not only has a good scheme, but players who are playing through the whistle, essentially, like, it's going to lead to wins and it's going to lead to a good culture. Because like, you can't just keep losing and then say, well, we have a good culture. We like all these guys, they're all fighting for one another. And no, because losing is the part that breaks the culture. I mean, so you do need to have that good offensive scheme and that good, I would say, just person who can like lead that or, implement that and then lead that way. So that's for me to say that I do think some of these candidates that are out there, Ben Johnson, Joe Brady, Liam Cohen, are probably the 3 that I'm looking at the most, but I'm also not discounting guys like Mike Vrabel and other, potential retread coaches, because Vrabel has had success. We know that even though it's kind of, it definitely fell off at the end for the Titans, he was able to get not one, but two good offensive coordinators, actually win playoff games too. He outcoached Belichick in 2019. So I think that's something you have to account for. But at the same time, I think there is a ceiling. You've kind of seen the ceiling with Mike Vrabel. And yes, he did not have the best quarterbacks. There was the situation where the GM change comes in, they trade AJ Brown. Well, I guess that happened earlier, but all of those things happening above him. With guys like Ben Johnson, Liam Cohen, Joe Brady, they've been able to sustain success now with their offenses. Now, Liam Cohen's been a little bit shorter in his tenure because this is his first year as an offensive coordinator at the NFL level. But Joe Brady's done it for a bit. Ben Johnson, we know he's had success with the Detroit Lions. And, as you kind of get into those positions, I feel like you ultimately learn how to lead, and you ultimately learn, what your players like, what your players dislike. The Detroit Lions players talk glowingly of Ben Johnson. You can't. I know Patrick Finley from the Sun-Times did a story about just getting a ton of different quotes from the Lions players about him. And then somebody like Joe Brady, he's had multiple stops where he's seen the good and he's seen the bad. I don't necessarily look at his Carolina Panthers tenure as a strike against him. I look at that as, well, he was able to get something out of Teddy Bridgewater. He was able to do something with that offense. And then he saw things kind of go downhill with Matt Rule. And you learn from those experiences, like, okay, how would I do things differently? I'm still a young man. I can climb back up the ladder, which he did, going from the quarterbacks coach with the Bills now to offensive coordinator and getting the absolute most out of Josh Allen in that unit. So you just learn how to lead from different experiences, I guess I would say. And, all of those things, you become a leader of men in some type of way. But winning is the thing that gets you there the most. And I think you have a better chance with Ben Johnson, Liam Cohen, Joe Brady than Mike Vrabel. But again, I wouldn't discount him.
And one other thing that people need to understand about this coaching search, the experience versus the inexperience, is that we all get, you and I obviously, and then those who are watching this, we all have like regular jobs, day jobs, night jobs, or whatever we've done in the past. We all get our start somewhere. We all start inexperienced, and then we get the opportunity to learn and then just gain experiences, etc. So, the Bears. The fans who are complaining about hiring an inexperienced coaches and stuff like that. Listen, every coach, even the Andy Reid, Bill Belichick's of the world, they all get their start somewhere. Whether it's the first time, even if it's a first time job. So the most important aspect for the Bears, and they have failed this very, very miserably, is that they have to pick the right candidates. They have to be able to vet and then do a due diligence, which I think under the leadership of George McCaskey, they have failed miserably in that area, in addition to not being able to align the quarterback, the GM, and the head coach under his guidance. So, with the Ryan Poles looking kind of like a defeated man the day they announced the firing of Matt Eberflus, which had to be done, of course. I think the question is becoming more and more apparent about his future as well. Does Ryan Poles deserve a chance to pick the new head coach, just like Ryan Pace did? To be honest, right now, in my opinion, Brendan, that the lot of negatives are starting to add up. That is not looking good for Poles. In addition to that, the hit piece that was written by Dan Weeder last week that came out, if you remember. Where are you on Ryan Poles' job security, and do you give him another chance, or do you feel like he blew his chances?
I've waffled on this a lot. I'm not going to lie.
I understand.
A few weeks. A few weeks ago, I definitely would have said yes, because I believed in the fact that while I understood that Ryan Poles did pick Matt Eberflus, even back going back to 2022, that was never in question to me. I know the process was always interesting about hiring the finalists or bringing in the finalists and then hiring your GM and asking him to pick from that pool of finalists. But from what my understanding is, he had every authority to go back to the complete pool and pick somebody new. But he liked Matt Eberflus, while others on that hiring committee preferred Dan Quinn. Bill Polian, from what I understand, liked Jim Caldwell. So it was his call. But I believed in the roster that he put together. I really did. And, there was only every time Matt Eberflus mismanaged the end of a game, didn't call a right challenge or whatever, you could always lean back on, well, this roster is still talented and they should be playing better, but they're being held back by the coaching staff. And while that could still be true now under Thomas Brown and Eric Washington and Chris Beatty, who are the three main guys right now, at least on offense and defense, they don't have as much benefit of the doubt now because in a bunch of different aspects, they're playing much worse than they did under Matt Eberflus. And that does fall at the feet of Ryan Poles. And then you start to see all of the bad moves that he put together and you start to take off the blinders a little bit because, look, I don't know how you feel about this. I see NFL fans and Bears fans alike. There's a hierarchy of blame, and it always starts with the coordinators, and then it goes to the head coach. And then it goes to the GM. Like once there's certain people to blame, we are at the GM phase right now. And
right, because we removed the OC and the head coach completely now. So that's the
exactly
left in the food chain there. So
exactly. And then once everything else kind of gets settled, then the quarterback comes in there. And I'm not, we're still ways away from, any Caleb conversations, thankfully. But there is deserved blame for Ryan Poles. So in my opinion, if I were just looking at this objectively, I would probably say no. Part of me wants to say yes, because I do think GMs, we've seen it in the past, when they get a chance to hire a second head coach, they kind of they got it more right than wrong before. And for as many warts as Matt Nagy had, Ryan Pace and then the president, Ted Phillips, they at least went about the process correctly. They vetted the right candidates. Matt Nagy was absolutely this year's Ben Johnson or a couple years ago, Brian Dable. Like he was the hot guy. And he did have various degrees of success in Chicago. I mean, 2 playoff appearances. He only had 1 losing season. Obviously, it ended poorly, but you look back at those years and say, well, it wasn't as bad as it has been now. But the issue is Ryan Poles hasn't done enough good to make me believe that he can be the guy to find the right person for this staff specifically, or for this roster, specifically Caleb Williams, because he seems to kind of want the guys who are like him. Like you want like-minded individuals kind of next to you, I feel like. And I think he had that with Matt Eberflus. That was his guy. He had that with Shane Waldron. I know that Shane Waldron was Brian Poles was a big advocate for Shane Waldron, which is probably why he had that muted response when he took forever to answer the question, like, where did it go wrong with Shane Waldron? Because he probably felt personally responsible for that. So if you look at all of those issues and his inability to put together a staff, and not only that, but then put together a guy or find another offensive staff who can get the most out of the rookie quarterback, who was running things like he was running a veteran quarterback who's been there for 5 years, then you have a problem. So while I really do want the GM to be on the same timeline as the quarterback that he selected, I don't think at this point it's the right thing for this team going forward because of all of the issues, all of the mismanaged picks or trades that we've seen. There's just a lot more good than bad at this point.
I totally agree. A lot of the negatives are starting to creep in, and the issue with the coaching hiring process that looks like it's completely flawed. And it's been kind of exacerbated by the fact that both Eberflus and Poles himself, and also Shane Waldron, happen to share the same agent in former Bear Trace Armstrong. So you kind of have to wonder if they even had the handshake deal per se already in the first place, despite the fact that Poles being more proactively involved in the hiring process of the OC this time around, and it only lasted 9 games. And I can understand that there's a deep shame and embarrassment on the part of Poles on the day that they fired Matt Eberflus, because I think I think you'll probably agree with me on this. Even with the Hard Knocks and everything, it seems as though Ryan Poles doesn't be able to judge more from pragmatically, but he gets very, very attached and gets too emotional to certain things.
I definitely would agree with that. I mean, I thought it was interesting. I don't want to say too emotional, but you're right. It does kind of affect him when he's cutting players, and in some aspects, you do want that. You want a GM that cares. You want that to be seen as a positive for players to want to come to Chicago to say, "Hey, I know I'm going to be taken care of. I know that this man cares. I want to believe that this regime cares." But at the same time, it does cloud your judgment at times. I mean, look at the Velus Jones situation. Now, who knows if they actually could have gotten a pick for him, but still Ryan Poles was like, I can't get rid of him for less than this. And I still see value in it. And sure enough, he almost cost the Bears their first game, and he was inactive after that. He wanted to trade up multiple times to get Roma Dunze. He was locked in on taking Torrey Taylor. And from my understanding, he wanted to trade up for Torrey Taylor. Like he's kind of crazy in that aspect, and he gets a little too aggressive. He gets attached to that, and that's where he does have the little yin and yang with Ian Cunningham, who's able to kind of hold him back a little.
Yeah, like that. Yeah.
Right. But to your point about being too emotional or maybe finding guys that are like-minded, I think when it comes to building that staff, Poles maybe just is afraid to take those risks to bring in some disruptors. Jalen Carter would have been a disruptor, and that was a non-starter for him. And, we can argue till the cows come home that, Darnell Wright or Jalen Carter, both guys I know Jalen Carter is obviously, doing phenomenally in Philly. The Bears still needed a tackle, but still, like, you can argue that, yeah, Jalen Carter, you can go past the personality and have somebody who can be a
field stuff that was being well documented.
Exactly. And also not wanting to be challenged. Or I'm not saying this Poles wanted or didn't want this, but look, like you and I working day jobs, if we're bringing somebody on, you want somebody that can fit your culture and you can work with well. I think football is a little bit different, where you do want somebody who can kind of like push you to be more successful. I think some of the best teams we've seen in Bears past with Mike Ditka and Buddy Ryan, those two didn't get along at all, but they were so damn successful together. And even Lovie Smith and Ron Rivera in the 2000s, that was a similar type of deal. So, and I know that when they were looking for offensive coordinators, David Kaplan talked about that Matt Eberflus didn't want Cliff Kingsbury because he would have been threatened by his previous past coaching experience. So just things like that, that's the biggest issue in my opinion. And I think it goes to your point, Ryan Poles being too emotional sometimes, kind of looking past certain things and really getting attached to the wrong types of players who aren't the best fits for the team.
Or even coach for that matter, as well, as we found out the hard way.
Yes.
Nicholas mentions, here's the thing, there aren't really good candidates for the GM job. Nicholas, I disagree with this. There will be plenty of candidates out there who deserve it. There's only 32 jobs, just like the head coaches that are out there. And unfortunately, I do not want that to be used as an excuse, whether it's by Kevin Warren or even, God forbid, George McCaskey, to say, there aren't any good candidates for the GM, so I'm going to keep Ryan. That's a no-no for any. That's not how you should run, considering how bad the process has been conducted by Ryan Poles. Now, speaking of the process, it seems as though a lot of people do have an issue with Kevin Warren getting heavily involved. Per se, and it's basically he runs the show now. I think there's this misnomer that he is the de facto GM. He's going to be doing scouting trips. He's the one who's going to be making draft choices and stuff like that, per se. Um, let's get my take on this one is that people are kind of like being consumed with this hatred towards Warren, that they can't see things clearly, and then that's not an insult against anybody. Um, Again, I mentioned the terrible vetting, and then the lack of due diligence is what ultimately doomed Ryan Poles. And if he gets fired, I think that's one of the main reasons why he gets fired for that. So having an experienced executive like Warren, who worked with then St. Louis Rams, and then also with Detroit and Minnesota, he has experiences and he has connections. So, and he also was a trained lawyer and was a player agent. So he knows the whole process. And, when he took over last year, remember, we went through a disaster with Alan Williams and David Walker being both gone for HR violations and stuff like that. So Warren already seen the dysfunction from a different perspective, and he obviously wants to make sure that this team isn't getting into trouble with the law or embarrassing themselves. So to me, I'm okay with Warren being involved, and perhaps maybe if you're going to hire a head coach, maybe you might want to hire a head coach first, and then let the coach pick the GM, like we saw with San Francisco, and then with Buffalo, and also Los Angeles Chargers when they hired Jim Harbaugh. Where's your comfort level with Warren's involvement, and then do you think that maybe coach should be first and then let him pick the GM?
So when it comes to Warren, I'm definitely okay with it. Like you said, he's been around successful organizations. He's seen different front offices. I mean, he commissioned the Big Ten, for God's sake, like a few years ago. And I know there were some missteps there, especially with COVID. But you know what? There were a ton of missteps with COVID anyway. Like everybody sort of stepped in it at one point or another. We can look back on that and just look at some of those decisions. But people get so fixated on like being a football guy and like really knowing the X's and O's. Like a lot of team presidents aren't going to be like that. Kevin Warren is the type of football guy that knows how a football office needs to run. And like you mentioned, he has connections. He knows different people. He's been in a ton of different circles. It is a stark contrast still to what we saw with Ted Phillips, who just came up with the Bears, who was an accountant and just kind of attached himself to George McCaskey and Michael McCaskey to become their team president, who he had no other experience with, at least, running in that type of situation with the front office like Kevin Warren did. So, and also people want to say, well, Kevin Warren's just a politician. I'm like, he's the president. Of course he should be some type of politician. Like he's the guy to step in. I mean, we don't need to get into like politics here, but you want a president to come in and say the right things and reassure and, kind of get people on the track as that key decision maker while working with everybody else with different branches, and this, you can say the same thing about the Bears at all of the different staff at Hallis Hall. So I think he is doing that job. Now, everybody wants to point to the stadium issue, and I'm with that as well. He has not done as good of a job there. I think there are also some things that are out of his control that maybe he didn't know about, but I would say he's putting together a staff. I do feel comfortable with him finding a guy that he knows that I can win with this person. I can have a successful front office with this person. Maybe he finds somebody who can push him a little bit as well and kind of push the envelope to make sure the Bears get better. So I'm okay with him being involved in that standpoint. I don't want him to weigh in or at least have deciding factors on who the next Bears running back should be or what they do with Keenan Allen. Right. But yes, bring in those key decision makers. Now to your second question about whether the head coach should pick the GM or at least be aligned there. I go back and forth on this because I feel I've always been under that tree that the GM should come first and then the head coach. But to your point, we have seen different teams be successful in that other manner, like the 49ers, to bring in the head coach and then the GM. I don't. If you can find the right two guys, and I know I'll shout out Bill Zimmerman of Windy City Gridiron, who put this idea out there a couple weeks ago that you could potentially get the Lions assistant general manager Ray Agnew and Ben Johnson to come together, because those two have worked together. You have that connection now. Something like that makes sense. But I think if it does make sense from that standpoint, and you're not just kind of like, shooting something in the dark and, going to Mike Vrabel, for example, bringing him in and say, okay, you pick the GM. Who do you got? Like, is there anybody that you've worked with previously? It has to make sense. So I'm okay with it. My past tells me I'm still a little trepidatious, I guess, with it, but it hasn't worked in the past for the Bears. So why not try something new?
Exactly. Like you said, like Bill Zimmerman was saying, Ray Agnew and Ben Johnson, that would be a winning combo. Obviously, Ray Agnew is a former player and also an assistant GM and a scout with a tremendous background, with a lot of success with the Lions. So, for Ben Johnson, you definitely want to work with somebody who is aligned with you on the contract and the timeline together. Mm-hmm. So, allowing Ryan Poles to be in the interview process, and for Poles to having to sell himself to that coach, and like I'm safe. Listen, yeah. I will fix the offensive line. I'll fix the defensive line. I'll do whatever it takes this offseason, because I cannot afford to lose this job. I cannot afford to screw this up. So.
Yeah, and Steven, like about that, you need to sign Ryan Poles to an extension. If you keep
exactly.
You cannot, under any circumstances, let him be a lame duck GM going into his final year. You need to provide security. Absolutely. Or you need to move on. And I think, if you don't feel comfortable giving Ryan Poles an extension because of the lack of success, they did it with Ryan Pace. And I know there were a lot of issues. People were kind of questioning that, like, why wouldn't you just move on because of the issues there from 2015 to 2017? It's a valid question, but you're right. Like, they have to be comfortable with Ryan Poles, and you have to kind of show them that money and show them that security for that to happen. And even then, I think people still might be a little concerned because of just the Bears' track record.
That's understandable. But, if, like you said, if you're uncomfortable and if you're having some doubts that's inside of you, it's hard to get rid of you. And in this case, it's Kevin Warren. What's stopping you? And I know there are people concerned about George meddling, and that's a very valid concern. But at least George and Ryan convinced them to finally move on from Eberflus, which is something that I think a lot of fans were like, well, it will never happen, but it happened. Mm-hmm. and a lot of the argument can be made that Eberflus was just so bad, not just with X's and O's, but the way he handled himself, skirting, accountability for such a long time. It really, really had to happen sooner rather than later. And they finally did it. So, credit goes to, Warren and Poles to convince George McCaskey. And, 10 years ago, we all remember, Mark Trestman and Phil Emery. It was such a shit show, for the lack of terms. And, both men were completely removed. And, Phil Emery never, unfortunately recovered from that experience. So I think, there are certain rules to the exceptions. The Bears have done it a decade ago, and now a decade later, we have a even worse head coach and the general manager who just can't seem to, put things together right now. So, hopefully, there's no point in keeping Ryan Poles and allowing him to interview these new candidates. And if the new coach is like, I want to hire my own, general manager, then I don't want to take this job. So hopefully, we don't have to come to that. And hopefully the candidates will like, I'm not taking this job. I'll go somewhere else, or I'll just stay put. But I think that the Bears are, with the Warrens' involvement in the due diligence, hopefully they will be able to get it together. No more, search firms used by former GMs and executives, because unfortunately they're just basically in it for themselves. I can't, I don't want to say negative things, but the track record has proven with the Bears, with Ernie Accorsi hiring John Fox, and then now Matt Eberflus being hired by, Bill Polian because of the Colts connections in the past. So no more of that, and I hope Warren won't be swayed into doing so, because there's absolutely no point in allowing Warren to do his job when he's being hounded by George McCaskey and the NFL, cronyism, just destroying the inner works within the Hallis Hall, and that could certainly have a negative impact, both short term and long term. My guest tonight is Brendan Sugrue, who is the associate editor with the Bears Wire, part of the USA Today network. Brendan, let's kind of look already. Rainbow Slice is asking this question: if they don't draft O-line this year, I'm done. So, which kind of like transition into the off season, the NFL draft positions of needs and everything. How would you rank the Bears draft needs right now? Because I know people would like to see the offensive line beefed up without question. The interior, the center, and maybe a tackle. That's like 3 starters at least, or even, God forbid, maybe 4, which is obviously kind of difficult to fill all of them in one season. They also need an edge rusher, a young edge rusher to pair with Montez Sweat. Unfortunately, because of the injuries, Sweat's production is kind of down as well. But the interior defensive line is also a massive need, with unable to stop the run after Andrew Billings went down with an injury. So how would you rank the Bears' need as of today?
The only question I have is which I want to put first, because it's chalk, but it's the defensive line and the offensive line, and it's 1A and 1B, and I think you can make an argument for both because they're just so thin, and there's talent on both sides there. I mean, I'm higher on Braxton Jones than most. I understand that. I think he has a place on this offensive line, whether that's left tackle or maybe something like left guard or, right guard, pushing him inside. That remains to be seen, but I think he adds value there. There's an argument to be made that you should re-sign Tevin Jenkins, even though you do know there's injury history there. Although at some point, if you don't think you're going to get Trey Smith or something like that, you still have to get talented individuals to fill those spots on the line. And we know Darnell Wright's not going anywhere, but yeah, there's definitely an argument to be made that there's 3 spots at the very least on this offensive line that need to be filled, and some can argue for 4. And then on the defensive line, there's just not enough star power there. I think Montez Sweat is a good player. I don't think anybody would classify him as a star at this point. Javon Dexter, same thing. He's a good impact player, but he hasn't ascended to that level of like an actual difference maker. Andrew Billings is clearly the linchpin of that defense, because once he goes down, everything goes to hell. So you don't have enough depth there. And then guys like DeMarcus Walker, he's a guy, he gives you something, but he's just not like as big of an impact player. Austin Booker is a 5th round pick. You can't really expect him to take that leap, although I did think he was going to have a pretty good rookie year, and that kind of blew up in my face, unfortunately. Darrell Taylor hasn't really done much since the first month of the season as well. So like, it really comes down to like, who is the better I'll say this for the draft: who is the better prospect you have when you're picking in the first round? And that could be who knows where it's at inside the top 10 at this point. But Mason Graham, Kelvin Banks are the 2 names that have been most linked to the Bears at this point. We have a long way to go.
Wow, yeah, long way.
Yes. And so that's the thing. I don't get into draft really start. I look at players here and there, but I don't get into sort of like studying until the off season, because I don't know. I live for the moment. I live for the regular season. We only get so many football games. I feel like it's important to focus on that, but that's that's something that'll come down in the future. But it's definitely the trenches. I mean, we've seen the most successful teams build both sides of the line and look at teams like the Lions, the Ravens, the 49ers up until this year. So that's where it needs to happen. We'll see what happens to free agency. We'll see who hits the open market. We'll see who's potentially a trade candidate, and then we'll see sort of who starts rising up the draft boards. But those are definitely the two positions you need to consider, and it's not even close.
Yeah, that's true. Trenches. So you don't have any specific order. It has to be trenches, defense or offense, either way. Okay, that's true. So a lot of questions has been being asked about Braxton Jones's future. I know it's easy to get rid of a player, but it's a lot difficult to, find a replacement for a player of that caliber. Do you still feel confident about Braxton Jones, or do you feel like next year is a do or die for him?
Oh, it's a do or die for sure. There's absolutely no reason to get rid of him yet. And this is another issue. I mean, was it Pace? Yeah, I guess it was Ryan Pace his last year. I took major issue with the Bears releasing Charles Leno like a day after they drafted Tevin Jenkins, because they just automatically assumed, well, we have our left tackle of the future. We don't need Charles Leno, who is, I think he had one more year left, and he was, getting paid like a top 15 left tackle. They just cut him loose. And then lo and behold, Tevin Jenkins gets hurt. He can't even play left tackle. You're relying on Larry Borum and, 41-year-old Jason Peters. I couldn't remember his name for a second. And meanwhile, Charles Leno had a good few years with Washington. So my issue is, like, you should keep Braxton Jones. At the minimum, he's competing for a job with potentially a draft pick or somebody in free agency. I just think you can do a lot worse if you get rid of him. And yeah, there's no rush to sign him. Let him play it out and see what happens. And, he's a capable offensive lineman. We saw it. I mean, shoot, he missed the Patriots game. And look, Larry Borum's letting up a ton of sacks. The Patriots sacked Williams 9 times. He misses on Monday night. And then Karana Magaje is totally unprepared. Like, the offensive line isn't great when he's on the field, but it is a hell of a lot worse when he's off the field.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. So, it's again, it's easier to criticize and try to get rid of a player. And again, this goes back to another pet peeve of Ryan Poles. A lot of times new GM and a new coach comes in, it's easy. They want to get rid of the old players from the old regimes in the past. You know what I mean? So, with the Bears in this case, they couldn't come to terms with, Roquan Smith. David Montgomery was offered a similar money, but he ended up going to Detroit, which obviously it looks like a very smart decision, although he is out of the season with an injury, unfortunately. But, it's easy to get rid of players, but you also have to have the right replacement. And sometimes with the coaches, it's always about the system and the fit. And, that gets so overblown. We tend to get rid of players because he or she doesn't fit into the system. Whereas, great, smart coaches, they find a way to alter their system and allow that player to, excel, which in terms of football, we see so many coaches fail miserably, whether you're an experienced coach or a first-time coach coming out of a college or in the pros. So, same with the general manager. I think whoever is the GM, I just hope that they don't, if it's a new GM, I just hope that, they're not really quick to get rid of the, the players that was signed by Poles, like, Tremaine Edmonds, DeAndre Swift, or, Andrew Billings of the world, just because, they were, given a big contract, they want to automatically get rid of them. Just find a way to, use them while they still have a value. So I hope that that will be the case with the, whoever the GM is. And I'm, paraphrasing it as if it's the new GM that's going to be coming in and taking it over. So let's do some quick lightning round questions. My guest once again is Brendan Sugrue from the Bear Talk, associate editor, and also the co-host of his own podcast, the Bear Down Chicago podcast as well. So, any particular player do you see in this offseason that could be like a surprise candidate for being cut? I could throw some names. Edmonds, of course, DeAndre Swift, obviously, make too much money to be, to be very, very unproductive. Who else do you see somebody being cut this offseason?
That's a good question. Man, I know this is lightning round. I don't want to take too long thinking. Maybe DeMarcus Walker, but because he was on a 3-year deal, but he's still impactful. So I don't necessarily think that's gonna happen. And he's versatile too. So even if you end up switching defenses or something, he has a role to play no matter what. Tremaine Edmonds, probably not. I just think there's too much dead cap there. I think they're going to be with him for at least one more year. And I don't think TJ Edwards is going anywhere because he's on a cheap deal. I mean, Nate Davis was the obvious answer before he got cut.
Of course. What about Swift?
What? Maybe
Swift is playing his final downs with the Bears the next couple of games.
I'd have to. I haven't looked at the contract because that does play a factor in. I'm going to say no because I do think you could still do something with him. He's actually proven to be very durable too, because I know early on in his Lions career, that wasn't the case. And he's having a fine season overall. It's not great. He's probably overpaid a little bit, but you still need running backs. You know what? I'll put something. I'll make a weird potential bold prediction. I don't think this is going to happen, but I think there could be signs. I wonder what's going to happen with Jaquan Brisker next year. I don't know how he is physically with his injury. I think that plays into it. He's also been very outspoken about the team too. He was the one guy kind of going on Twitter when it came to Matt Eberflus potentially getting fired and all of his cryptic tweets. It was very, it was kind of funny. It was kind of like, okay, like clearly the players are, not happy about this. But at the same time, he was Eberflus's guy. Like those guys were tight early in like 2022 and even early in 2023. And if a switch was flipped, something is going on there with this concussion. I don't exactly know what. I just wonder if there's going to be a point where they just cut bait. There's like an untenable situation. Jaquan Brisker wants out. So I'll just put that as a dark horse, but it still feels kind of rare or, unlikely to happen.
Let's see. Tyreek Stevenson. Is he with the team or is he gone?
I think he's still with the team. I mean, he's still on a rookie contract. He's still a talented player. Is he a starter next year? That is definitely a conversation to be had. But I don't think going into his third year that he's going to be gone yet.
Keenan Allen, is he goner or do you think he'll stay for another 1 year?
I think he's gone, but I would not be surprised if he's back. I know he's talked about it a lot. Now guys always talk at this point of the season too. Like, I only want to be here. I only want to go to LA. I mean, it all depends on who is going to pay Keenan Allen the most money, I feel like, and we'll see what kind of dollars he puts together or he commands and a team is willing to give him. I will say though, like Caleb Williams throws his way a lot. And so I think everybody wants to say, Keenan Allen, get rid of him, all of that. I would be perfectly fine if they brought him back at the right price. I don't know. With everything else, all the smoke, I think he's going to be gone next year.
What grade do you give Caleb Williams so far this year?
I'm going to go B-. The stats look better than the eye test at this point because of the fact that he has not been able to consistently put up numbers in the first half. And that's going back even, to the Washington game. Really, it wasn't like the last time he was able to actually make an impact in the first half was against the Jaguars when, of course, they won. Maybe the Vikings a little bit, but like a lot of his passing numbers came in the second half when teams were playing a little bit different, once they were ahead, essentially. So he has had moments. I mean, I do appreciate that he's not turning the ball over, but at the same time, he has been inaccurate at times. He's taking some sacks that he shouldn't. but like, I don't think he's been like atrocious. I don't think he's been a bust. I mean, he's still putting together one of the better seasons we've seen from a Bears quarterback from a passing standpoint. I mean, when it's all said and done at the end of the season, he could have a top 5 passing yard season in team history, or at least, in modern team history, which is insane to think about. So yeah, I'd say B- feels like an appropriate grade at this point.
Outside of Ben Johnson, or if Ben Johnson wasn't available, who is your top head coaching candidate? Who would you hire?
I really like Joe Brady. I've been a big Joe Brady fan for a while, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I feel like he kind of has that Kyle Shanahan trajectory in that he's seen multiple stops. He has had success, and he's also had failures. And Kyle Shanahan kind of had the same thing. I mean, 2014 with the Browns was not a good fit, and there was infighting within the front office, and he had to go somewhere else. And then he started to be successful. He took Matt Ryan, made him into a legit MVP candidate, had success with the Falcons. That's kind of what he's doing now, or with Joe Brady's doing now with the Bills. With Josh Allen. Yeah. So I just appreciate that he's had those those different years of experience. I know he's still young, but I really like what he's been able to do with Allen and, his other multiple stops as well.
Who's your NFL MVP? Is it Josh Allen this year?
It was, but I'm starting to think it might be Lamar, because I'm just looking. I'm looking at the numbers a little more, because Josh Allen's been he's had 2 of those big games that have really catapulted him. But I think if Lamar beats the Steelers, things might get a little bit different, because he has some chances to really showcase himself at the end of the year. And I think he's going to go on a tear to finish out the year. So I'm going to, and also maybe because I also put down a bet with him at plus money to win. So I'm going to say Lamar, just hoping to win my
bet. Scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you with the Detroit's current state right now?
In terms of them potentially winning?
No, potentially not making it, because of all the injuries and everything.
Oh, I would be concerned. I mean, the Bills just being able to run all over them, basically. Yeah. The Packers nearly had them as well. And I do think Dan Campbell, for as fun as he is, the results are sometimes better than the process with him. And I do think there are times where he is too reckless when it comes to going for it on 4th down. And we saw it last year. It burned them. And I think it's going to burn them again this year. With the Eagles, the Vikings, and even the Packers, and I'll throw the Bucs in there as a sleeper team too. They
actually lost to the Bucs in week 2 or 3, something like that.
Yes, they did. They and the Bucs are rolling right now when it comes to the offense, now that they're getting a little bit healthier. So, I would be concerned with Detroit because of the amount of injuries, and I want to see how they do without Montgomery as well, because they really rely on those 2 backs. And if they don't get home field advantage, that's going to be the big key. If somebody like Philly comes in and swoops in, and they have to go to Philly in late January, I mean, Jared Goff, late January, cold weather, not feeling it. So we'll see.
And let's finish with this one. Rainbow Slice, what are your thoughts on trading for a head coach? I know there was a crazy rumor about Kyle Shanahan that was started out of nowhere, that got shut down by himself leading up to the 49er game. Sean McVay is, long been rumored to be, kind of always waffling about his future and everything. Maybe Kevin Stefanski could be like, I don't want to deal with the nonsense of having to deal with Deshaun Watson again, and maybe part ways or be available for a cheap draft picks. Your thoughts on trading for a head coach, or do you feel like you don't want anything to do with the retreads?
No, I think when it comes to, I'd be okay with it, but it has to be the right coach. And I really only do it for 2 guys, and McVay and Shanahan are probably those 2 guys. Okay. Stefanski, I think he's a fine head coach. I just don't think he's worth actually trading draft capital for. Guys like McVay and Shanahan are just a tier above them. Okay. And look, and you know what? It's worked with Sean Payton, like you said. that clearly was worth it once he got his guy and realized the type of quarterback that he needed. So there is, it's very, very, very unlikely. I'll just say that. But if there were a situation to come up and McVay says, look, I don't think I want to do this anymore in LA. I want a younger team. I don't know why he'd come to Chicago and leave LA, because he seems like an LA type of guy. But if that were to happen, I would be definitely okay with surrendering draft picks.
Okay, maybe Stefanski for draft pick seems like a bit of a reach. If Stefanski was fired or resigns and available, would you give him at least like a puncher's chance of getting a strong interview process?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about the guy that stabilized, at least for a period of time, Cleveland Browns football. Like that, he took them to the playoffs twice.
Yeah,
I mean that's incredible. And I would want to know now what role he had in Baker Mayfield leaving, because I think that was a colossal mistake. Those are questions I want to ask. How involved he was with the Deshaun Watson trade. If this was something that went over his head and was just strictly the owner and GM, I can't remember where that relationship is, but things like that I would want questions. But yeah, he would definitely be on my short list for candidates.
Well, listen, Brendan, thank you very much for your time tonight. I know it's, with the college football already on television, a lot of people are probably watching this and, following us on this, on our live stream as well. And thank you very much for Nicholas and others for also commenting and asking questions as well. Brendan, thank you for your time. Happy holidays to you and your family. And hopefully we'll do this again very soon, maybe later next month when we know, the draft order, and then the, hopefully, by then, or maybe we might have to wait until, the playoffs is officially over for, somebody like Ben Johnson, Joe Brady, or Liam Cohen's to be available and to be, officially hired. So, we have to kind of like exercise a little bit of patience here, which is not something that a lot of Bears fans do not have these days, unfortunately, and for good reasons. But Brendan, look forward to having you on again very soon under those circumstances, and hopefully you'll be able to join us again on our live stream.
Yeah, sounds good, Steven. Really appreciate you having me, and it was fun talking. I'm glad we were finally able to connect, and hope you and your family have a great holiday season as well.
Thank you. Happy holidays, and we'll see you again. And thank you very much for joining us. For those who followed us tonight, and I want to wish you everybody a happy holidays, and we look forward to seeing you on next time on our AA team live stream.